All right, I think we're ready to get started. First, I wanted to just thank you all for coming. This has kind of been something in the planning for a while, pretty much since we started going out to Langham Island. Our first visit was last August, and we've had several work days since then, and many of you, if not most of you, have been there. And so just having John and having Bill here also is just an amazing accomplishment. So first I wanted to thank the sponsors for tonight, the Friends of Langham Island. Most of you are part of the IMPS Kankakee Torrent Chapter, the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission, the Woods and Prairie Foundation for paying for some of the facility for tonight, the Kankakee Soil and Water Conservation District for the projector and the screen, as well as the Medewa National Tallgrass Prairie for the video. We will be accepting donations if you feel moved to in the back, and there's also some other information about the local chapter at the back table. With that, I want to introduce Bill Glass, the ecologist at the Medewa National Tallgrass Prairie, and also a very important person when it comes to Langham Island as well.
Thanks. Trevor asked me to introduce John because, well, I've known John for a little while anyway. John has a long, illustrious career in conservation in Illinois. And John, if you don't know, was the first full-time paid employee with the Illinois Nature Preserves Commission. That goes back a long time ago. During that time, John was also really involved in some of the really important purchases of natural areas in Illinois, like Heron Pond, Fultz, Hill Prairie. And John was really instrumental in getting a lot of management going on in a lot of these preserves, which had been preserved but not really managed. John was also, if you probably know, wrote the Natural Divisions of Illinois, and he also was involved in the Natural Areas Inventory back in 1974. And those were really important publications that came out. They really drove the preservation of natural areas in Illinois from 1978, 76 onward. So that was really important work. And then later John became the state botanist with the Department of Conservation, the predecessor of the Department of Natural Resources, and that's when I met John. Because I was a natural heritage biologist. Kankakee County was one of my counties at the time. John had us always busy, but the great thing about John was he was one of those program managers that he had a lot of things for us to do, but he was always willing to come and help. And I always appreciated that. He wrote a number of recovery plans, including one for the Kankakee Mallow, which kind of drove the management for that. He also got us biologists starting to doing a lot of demographic monitoring of plants, rare plants. And we learned a lot from that. We learned a lot of management techniques from that. And I have a lot of fond memories of working with John on Langham Island, and I could go on about that, but I think would probably be stealing John's talk. So with that, I just want to introduce John Schwegman, and he's done a lot of great things through the years.
I think I'll use this. Well, thanks, Bill. It's good to get back up in this part of the country because we live way down in the far southern tip of Illinois. When we did all that work with Bill, I was working out of Springfield. It wasn't quite so far. But what I intend to do tonight is talk about the effort that we made about 25 years ago, I guess, or 30 years ago now, to clear up the island and get the Kankakee Mallow back on its feet. And it's needing that kind of additional help right now. And I hope that some of you are going to be some of the volunteers that help get it going. But first, I am a botanist, and I've kind of always been concerned or interested in how these rare plants got up here in northeastern Illinois, two of them in particular. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that also to begin with. So this is one of those plants. This is a leafy prairie clover. This plant was also on Altofa Island, or Langham Island, when the mallow was first discovered there back in the 1870s. And it's only in a little area in Middle Tennessee and then up here. In the same, this is another one. This is the Tennessee milk vetch. It occurred in one area in Kankakee County over by Aroma Park in a big gravel area called Mount Langham. There's Langham Island and there's Mount Langham in Kankakee. And I wondered where that name came from, and then I realized that the Surveyor General for the state of Illinois that hired the people to survey the land initially, his name was Langham, and these surveyors were naming things after him so they get the next contract, I think. So that was kind of interesting, trying to figure it, because I looked through all the list of early settlers in Kankakee County, and there were no Langhams on the list. No. Well, this is the Tennessee milk vetch. It has the very same range as the leafy prairie clover. Now, these don't have the same range as the Kankakee Mallow, but all of these rare plants some of them are on Langham Island. And this is just the Tennessee milk vetch up close. And this is a picture to show you where these plants originated from. And this is the Nashville Basin, this circular area here around Nashville, Tennessee. It's just full of limestone glades, and these glades are where both of those plants apparently have arisen and where they're most common. And at the end of the Ice Age, they managed somehow to get up here to Kankakee. And it's pretty, you can see it's quite a distance, but this is all prairie land. And then once it gets into Wabash Valley, there's a prairie here I'm going to show you a picture of, and it comes right on up, and it can get into the Kankakee drainage over here and then come down. And I think that's probably the logical way they came here. The Wabash River, at the late in the Ice Age, was not carrying any meltwater from the glaciers anymore. That was all the Great Lakes were being drained by the Illinois River. And so plants couldn't migrate up the Mississippi because all that meltwater coming down from Chicago area. But I think plants could go up the Wabash because there was good prairie habitat there, and there was not any meltwater coming down from the glaciers. Here's a little closer up view, and this is Lafayette, Indiana, and then the Tippecanoe River comes right up. These are sand areas, and they extend right into eastern Kankakee County. And I think the plants kind of took that route. Down near Vincennes and Lawrenceville, there's an airport here. This was a bomber pilot training base during World War II. And it's in a large gravel area, the largest prairie in the area, called Allison Prairie. And that's where the airport was. And here's a close-up of it. And this is some of the runways. And these are center pivot irrigations here. But see, this is a cemetery. This just preserves a complete example of the original gravel prairie here in the Wabash. And we worked out a deal with the airport authority. Their property goes out to this road, so we're restoring prairie in this part of their land as well. And one of the plants they have there is something we don't have up here, the royal catchfly. And it's a southern prairie plant. It's a tall Silene regia. Here's just another view of it. A very interesting plant. I think there are a few records of it from the southern part of the Chicago region, but I don't know if there's any still existing. And another plant that I don't know if many of you know, but this is in the Momence wetlands. This obviously apparently also came up the Wabash Valley and got into the Kankakee drainage. This is the little snowbell bush, Syrax americana. It's a southern swamp species of all things, but it has made its way up the Wabash and Tippecanoe valleys over into the Kankakee River Valley. And it's a very beautiful little shrub. So here's, you can almost, this is close up, you can see from Lafayette, here's the Tippecanoe River comes up here into this. These are sand areas and it extends right into the eastern part of Kankakee County. Langham Island's there, Mount Langham is right there. So I wanted to, well, and here you can see there's Langham Island, and here's this big pile of gravel that had that. This is where the Tennessee milk vetch was, and this is where the leafy prairie clover was, the two plants we were just talking about that made their way to Kankakee. So this is one of the reasons that I got the hint that maybe Langham was the surveyor. Notice the township line here goes right up and over the top of the mountain. This is a 70-foot high pile of gravel that dropped off of a glacier and or down through a hole in the glacier and created this mound of gravel. And it's been mined, a lot of it's been mined away. But Langham was the surveyor general of Illinois, and I guess after going right over this surveyor that did this, after going over the top of that little mountain, he decided to name it for his benefactor. Here's what it looks like in a Google Earth image today. This is the gravel pits are in here. I've never been out there, but we know that the Natural Areas Inventory looked at it and it did not qualify. It had been so disturbed by gravel mining and so forth that it no longer qualified as a natural area. So here's the Tennessee milk vetch again. Well, here's Kankakee, and then here's Langham Island. Let's go one more. And this is a better, more of a close-up view off of the Google Earth imagery. But right here's the island where the mallow occurs, and from 1834 to 1836, right next to it was a Potawatomi Indian village. And so we know Indians lived right there by the island. I don't think it's likely that they brought the plant there, but I guess it's always a possibility because it certainly is just there and not very widespread. One other place, maybe, and I don't think it's another good species. One good thing about looking at imagery like this that you can tell, and this is kind of getting off the beaten path a little bit, but you see Rock Creek coming down here and you see how it used to go like this. Apparently when the big Kankakee torrent came through here and the dam broke, it just actually cut a new channel. I don't think the recent Kankakee River ever really went around that way. I think that's just where the rock, earlier in the Ice Age, the Rock Creek went that way. So just something that you can see when you're looking at these aerials. Well, here it is. This is Iliamna remota. It's the remote mallow. Remote in the fact that most of its close relatives live in the Rocky Mountains. And there's one other species on a mountain in Virginia. And then on this island. So it's really remote from its relatives anyway. This is a picture I made in '86 from the air. This is the little town of Altorf here. And you can see this is thin shallows here. This is right at the beginning of what you'd call the rapids of the Kankakee Gorge, so to speak. You can see in here the areas that were once a cornfield and that are growing up now. And this was about the time we started working. We had actually been doing a little burning already when this picture was made. And here's a picture from an old ASCS, Agricultural Stabilization Service. In the 1930s, they photographed the whole countryside so they could calculate the acreage of crop fields. And this is from one of their photographs. And you can see this was a crop field then, the center of the island. And this is a low part of the island. This is the high bedrock part of the island. And then there was once a mill dam there too, but I don't know whether this is the road for getting out there or a riffle where they got out with their farm machinery to farm the island, or whether it's the actual old dam for the mill dam. Here's an interesting picture. I've flown over this island a lot of times in my many years. This was, I think, in '72. But this shows you, this is the island, the Mallow. Well, here's the bedrock island like this. This is what was there when the original land survey was done. This has been added on since then. It's almost all just alluvial soil. But the Mallow lives on this side of this island, about like this. And there's a lot of disturbance here because these big ice flows like this come down through there and tear the trees down. And that disturbance is apparently important to the survival of the mallows. Here's an example of the trees that have been pushed over by the ice, all down through here. And also some of the grassy vegetation that we eventually started burning. But on the inside of the, and this shows the habitat of the soil there, where the Kankakee Mallow grows. It's not sand and it's not rock. I mean, it's gravel. It's just a coarse gravel. This is Leucoidalis micranthus that grows in that same habitat on the south side of the island in this coarse gravel. And this is what the mallow likes, and it likes sunlight, so it gets that because the ice flows tear down the trees and open it up to sunlight. Here on the inside, on the smaller chute on the north side of the island, you can see the ice kind of knocks the bark off of the trees, but doesn't bring them down. And this is completely different from the other side. And we've never found any mallows over here on this side. But one thing I did find over here was the Lysomachia terrestris, swamp candles. Thank you. And you can see the river in the background. And I only saw one plant, but that's a very beautiful wildflower, and it's one of the rarer ones around. And another plant that was originally here, the first people who found the mallow here in the 1870s said that the buffalo clover, or one native clover, was on the island as well. But it's not there anymore, but I think it might be restored eventually back to the island. This is an annual. It kind of comes from seed every year. And so you have to have pretty much continuous fire or pretty much a continuous disturbance, or it'll get out-competed by the weeds and it'll die out. So, but I think that's part of the plan for the management of the island, is a pretty regular burning regime. Well, this is the other thing that was on the island is this, what we just saw a while ago, the leafy prairie clover, Dahlia foliosa. It came all the way from Middle Tennessee, and we welcome it here in the Kankakee River Valley now. And it's an interesting plant. Bill Glass and I monitored this over at Romeoville Prairie for a long time, and we've realized that it actually can rest. It can not come up in one year, and then the next year, in other words, it just doesn't put out any leaves. And if you can know right where to look, you can see that root crown still sticking up there. And then the next year, it'll put out leaves again. So it's kind of tricky knowing whether it's still in an area or not. We're hoping it's still at the island because we reintroduced it to Langham Island back in the mid-'80s. And it did take hold for a few years. I think I'll show you some pictures of it here in a minute. Here's where we first put the first seedlings in 1986. This big old, I thought this big rock on the shore might help us relocate that spot because we've lost the location of that, the exact location of that now. And the next year, we had seedlings right there. 1-year-old Dahlia foliosa seedlings from that seeding. We got the seed from Will County, so we know it's local ecotype seeds. And here in 95, so see that this one was 87 when they were 1-year-old. I took this picture out there in 1995. I retired in the end of 96, and so I don't have any more recent pictures of it than that. But it had survived for for about 8 or 9 years when the last time I saw it. But I think Bill says he thinks maybe it has finally disappeared, but we've not been burning it regularly, and I think it doesn't show up very good unless it is being burned. Well, here's the Kankakee Mallow, Iliamna remota, in flower. See these fuzzy things here? This is the fuzzy ends of the seeds that it makes. They haven't come out. It's like really like a wild hollyhock is probably the best way to describe it. It's in that, it's very closely related, and it does have its closest relatives in the Rocky Mountains. Most of the other members of the genus Iliamna, except for the one that's in a mountain in eastern Virginia. Here's one of the pollinators. Looks like I don't think it produces any nectar. I think the bees visit for pollen. They're pollen gathering, and you can see pollen on the legs of this bee that's gathering some pollen there. So that's how they affect the pollination of the plant. Well, in 1982, when we first realized that these plants were not reproducing, there were no young plants or no seedlings at all on the island. All we had were these 5 populations, 3 here and 2 here, on the west side of the island. And these 2 populations are in the old cornfield. And this one, and these are on the slope. And the next picture you're going to see is a picture of this one looking out to the river. And here it is. You can see the river in the background. But you see the direct sunlight on these plants. They're in a kind of wooded area, but they're only partially shaded. They really do need direct sunlight. And so it's dependent to some extent on the on the ice to clear out some of the shade. We also were working on eradicating the Amur honeysuckle. It's an invasive exotic shrub that was really taken over the area, and it's still bad out there from what I understand right now. On the smaller ones that we could spray, we did the foliar spray of the leaves. Now this is the district heritage biologist, Randy Hydorn, in 1983 when we first got started. And we would cut some of them and treat the stumps like this. And if they're small enough, then we would foliar spray them like Randy was doing. We did that for, I know, 4 years in a row. And it's just amazing how slow the progress was in trying to control them we're talking about a 20-acre island, and that's just a very slow process. And has the volunteers and the friends of Langham Island are getting started, I think, again at removing some of those trees, those shrubs. And in 1983, then, we did a total count. There were 180 flowering plants on the island when we were getting ready to start the burn, and there were no seedlings, and all but 2 of them had the flowers and seeds eaten off by deer. They literally got 99.5% of all of the seeds or the flowers that were going to produce seeds were consumed by deer. And we tried several things we hung little bags of human hair. We hung little bars of soap. We bought commercial deer repellent, and it helped some, but it wasn't the total answer. But amazingly, after we started working out there a lot and disturbing the deer, a lot of them, they apparently left, and we never really had a whole lot of problem after we really got the management going. So we also took seeds from this to the Mason State Nursery, the Department of Natural Resources Nursery, and we got this thing growing a lot. It's available in commercial nurseries. It's not a rare thing to get a hold of anymore. But these were 1-year-old seedlings. They were planted the year before, and then this is the second year. Just huge leaves. The plant is very aggressive, and especially when it has no competition like this. And behind it is the current false aster, another rare plant that was being grown at the state nursery. But these plants were 1.5 years old then when I took this picture. And I think they flowered the next year. So having this gives you, we dug them, and you can see they are rhizomatous. These plants form colonies by sending out these great big roots. We cut them off. They would go further than that. And so after the plant gets mature, it usually sends out these rhizomes. And this is from a researcher at Miami of Ohio University, Bill Pusateri. He did a lot of growing on this plant. And he said it's definitely rhizomatous, and the central plant will usually die after 4 or 5 years, but then all of the sprouts that came from it will continue on living. So the original plant's not necessarily real long-lived. So this is some material that we planted. I don't know if they're still in. This is the park headquarters. We planted some right in front of the park headquarters, and I imagine it might still be there. I haven't been by to see. And here's some at Lincoln Memorial Garden in Springfield. This is what you see in the spring. Each year, from the root crown, a new bud comes up and sends up a new stalk each year. And we were worried that the fire might impact that. And we had a committee of plant experts associated with the Illinois Endangered Species Protection Board that worked with me developing a recovery plan for the species. And we really, we started talking to the few people who were raising this plant, and we realized some people thought the fire might be detrimental to it, but when we talked to a park manager down at Peoria who had planted this thing in his prairie restoration 15 years earlier and had burned it every year for 15 years in a row, and it just loved it, So we knew we didn't have to worry that this was going to have any detrimental effect on the burning would have a detrimental effect on the plant. So we did begin the burning program. This is the guy that just introduced me, Bill Glass. And this, believe it or not, is me. I think Randy Hydorn made this picture, but this was the year we started, in 1983, when we started the burning program, managing program. And here's the first burn. The ground cover in the old cornfield is all what we call Canada bluegrass, Poa compressa. It's the flat-stemmed little bluegrass, and it doesn't produce a lot of fuel. So it doesn't burn. As you can see, it's not burning very, very hot right there. But it did clear out the area. And this is what it looked like after you burn it some. There are a lot of red buds out there that have moved into the field. But this plant here is Valerianella, is kind of a rare little annual plant that's also one of the rare plants on the island. And it just loves the fire. It just came up all over the place. And here it is, Valerianella umbilicata. Very small little annual flowers. So here's the Kankakee Mallow then in '86. We started burning in '83. And one of the things that we were talking a while ago about what the fuel is, the grassy fuel that you see there, I think is, well, it's kind of hard to say, but I think that it is probably some of it's Indian grass. And this is the island, the side where the mallow occurs. Again, another view. There's just enough grassy habitat there that you can get some pretty good fuel and get some pretty good burns. And brush piles. We got some pretty good brush pile fires. This one is in '86. And you can see the leaf cover back there doesn't burn as good as this grassy cover and the brush piles. Another view of the same thing. So here's after the burn. You can see still some smoldering. But what we were amazed with, here's Bill burning a brush pile. And this is where we really learned a lot about getting the seeds to germinate for the Kankakee Mallow, because this is what we realize now, that it takes fire to scarify the seeds. So let's take a look at the next one. And here's what you see. Here's where a log burned right here. And then right under it, there's no seed, there's no mallows. But around the edge where the temperature was just right, here's a little mallow seedling, here's another little mallow seedling here, here's one right here, and I think another one right here. So what you get is where the soil temperature gets just right in this band around this burning log, they're scarified and they germinate. Just outside of that, there are seeds, but they're not scarified, so they don't germinate. And in here, it got too hot, it killed the seeds. So you have this little band around a burning log, or even around a burning brush pile. And one of the things we had to do was try to monitor the effects. And this was our monitoring program for the seedlings, and that didn't become necessary. There were seedlings everywhere, and we weren't able to, it just wasn't necessary to follow each individual plant like we had done on some other plants that we were monitoring. But here's under a brush pile, and this is later in the summer after the brush pile is burned, and these are all little Kankakee mallows that came from seeds that were scarified by the heat of the fire so that they would germinate. I think the next picture is the same place 2 years later. Some of them, they were already flowering. This is the same patch that we just saw in the previous picture. And here they are, the same population in 1993. So it just, it did well. Well, you can see that the exotic species, here's these are the leaves of the honeysuckle. Here's the little mallow seedling coming up through that. So we still had a problem. These plants could germinate after they got the fire treatment, but it just didn't necessarily, well, I lost my train of thought. Didn't necessarily. Anyway, we got a new slide up here. So this shows how we went then. Here was the 180 plants we had when we started burning in '83, and they continued declining for about 3 years, and they started back up. And after about 5 years, the 180 flowering plants were 280 flowering plants, and then plus a similar number of seedlings, so we had about 560 total plants after about 5 years of our management program. So, and half of them were flowering plants and half were seedlings. So it was, we thought, a very successful program, and we think we know how to manage the milkweed, the mallow. So this is a picture of just one of the big banks that was produced by the burning of just a large stand on the south side of the island in kind of partial shade, which is just the habitat that it likes. And then this is my final slide. I think it was the very one I started off with, showing the Kankakee Mallow. And so the Langham Island has a lot of potential to be, it's got a lot of potential for restoration back to what it was like in the 1870s. Bring back the leafy prairie clover and the Kankakee mallow, bring back the buffalo clover, and keep some of these other rare plants that are already out there going. So that concludes what I wanted to say about the Langham Island. But while I was digging out all of these old slides for this program, I looked at all my other slides from Kankakee County, and I just would like to run through real quick some pictures of other natural areas in the county. And many of you may, this is the Bourbonnais geological area. It's a very nice outcrop. And I know it's in a park here in one of the towns. And it's good exposure of a Silurian reef. This limestone is. I don't know where this is. This is in the park on the north side of the river. And it's a large seep spring run, skunk cabbage here, and some of the large umbellifers plants over here. I don't know if anybody knows where that one is. It's across the river anyway from where most of us. And I don't even know where Simmering Slough is, but I had a picture of it and it says it was in Kankakee County. This is a beautiful Dolomite Prairie in Kankakee River State Park, and it was inundated when beavers dammed up the area and flooded it. But it was a very nice little small Dolomite Prairie. And here's some of the wetlands in there, in that old channel of Rock Creek and Muskrat Lodge and so forth. Picture of the river from the Warner Bridge back in '78. And here's Langham Island looking across the town of Altorf at it, another with the ice on the river. And the Momence wetlands. The upper part of the Kankakee River above Momence is so much different than it is down here. And it's a very wetland wonderland there. And that's where that little snowbell bush that I showed you earlier is. And then, of course, Gooseberry Island in the Iroquois River is also a nature preserve here in the county. So that kind of concludes it. But I'd like to... One other thing I was going to mention, and I whizzed right past it. When I talked to this researcher who was studying the Kankakee Mallow back in those days, and I was quoting some of his references, the things he found out. But I always want to tell you one thing. I said, well, what's your final analysis of this? And he says, well, it's good deer food. It's good for planting for stabilizations, and it's a good chew. He indicated that you could chew it like chewing tobacco, and I don't know exactly what that does for you. But it made me think that maybe if the Indians were doing something, maybe the Indians did plant some of it out there, if it was really a plant that was used in that way by the Indians. And so I don't know if I ever tried it or not, but apparently he said it was good to chew. So, any questions? Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on why it was only on this island and not?
No, that's really the mystery, because it's so far from all of its cousins out in the Rocky Mountains, and the area where it is was completely under ice, you know, during the Wisconsin glaciation, so it hadn't been there for, you know, maybe 20,000 years, which sounds a lot to us, but in geologic time it's not very much. So it is, you know, it does make you wonder how it got there, and nobody seems to have a good answer for that, unless maybe the Indians did bring it, you know, or something like that, people.
Is it genetically different enough that it could have changed that much in 10,000 years, say?
Well, I don't think they really know that it's changed from one of the existing species, you know, that it's there. Maybe it was more widespread and this is the last place that it's left, you know, or something like that. I don't know that the one in Virginia on the mountain is the leaves definitely look different, you know, slightly different, but it's very close to this too. And Bill Pusateri said they're both very close to one species out in the Rocky Mountains, as far as their nearest of kin appear to be. So it's hard to say how it got there. That's for sure. Yeah.
John, I just thought I'd add that you were talking about the clover,
Buffalo clover?
buffalo clover being at Langham Island. And the first time I saw buffalo clover was when seedlings came up around burnt logs and after a fire had been run through a site.
Yeah.
And it did exactly the same thing as the Kankakee Mallow seedlings did. They came up in that ring around where the logs burned up.
Yeah. Definitely seed scarification is required to make these seeds germinate. But the plants can live a long time because they have these root sprouts, you know. And that's another thing in its favor. So that's when we were seeing no reproduction, no seedlings, we were thinking that it had to reproduce from seeds all the time. That was before we knew that it was rhizomatous. So when we were thinking it had to have seed reproduction, we were wrong. It probably, some of these had generated from root sprouts too. Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah, Steve.
Could you talk about some of the other unusual plants on the island and your thoughts about any of them?
Well, the leafy prairie clover and the little valerianella are the two that I mentioned, and the buffalo clover. And the buffalo clover is an annual, comes from seeds every year. The others are, and so is the valerianella. But the leafy prairie clover is a perennial. By the way, I want to tell you one other thing about that is that plant is very delicious to rabbits. And I think, Bill, when we were studying that over there, at dusk, when the rabbits come out, it just folds up its leaves. It just looks more like a stick. That's one of the neatest defensive maneuvers you've ever seen a plant do. And and then the mallow. There's a violet, a rare violet out there, and I guess I haven't really looked into that very much. But there is one violet that was only a few places in Illinois, and one of them was on that island. So that's another possibility for looking it up. Actually, I got the flora. My list, I published a list of all the plants on the island at one time, and I'm sure that violet's in that. But that would be the list of the unusual plants. Carex hitchcockiana is out there, which you don't see that everywhere either, but most people don't care about carex. So. How far?
How long they farmed it?
How long?
How long was they farm on the island?
Oh, I don't know, but I don't know when it started, but I think in 1916 it is when they noticed that a botanist visited there, and he said that there was an old field there, but it looked like it had been abandoned. So I would say they probably around 1915 or 16 when they quit farming it, but I don't know when they started. Yeah.
The local family still lives in the area. The Magruders are their name. And I have pictures of 3 generations of people that farm probably on the island. The daughter contacted me at one point.
Did they mention when they started farming it?
Well, she thinks about 3 decades from the early 1900s till about the late 1930s, she thought.
Oh, okay. Any more? Oh, yeah.
So, could you repeat, you might have said it and I might have missed it, but why do the ice dams only go on the south side of the island and not the north side?
Well, it's much wider, and I think the ice flows can have more room to go around that way. And the ice flows that do go in the other are much narrower because the little river segment there is narrower, and they're not as when they're smaller, they're not as heavy, and they can't push the trees over the way the bigger, heavier ice can just push those trees down, where these smaller pieces of ice going through that narrow channel don't have the weight of ice to knock down the trees the way they do on the other side. Sorry, they don't have the weight in order to knock down the trees. That's my guess. Yes.
When you guys were clearing, were you just taking out honeysuckle and a few non-native shrubs, or did you clear?
We're just Amur honeysuckle is all we were taking. It was so abundant out there, and still is.
It still is, sure.